As part of our Good Friday service, I'd like to note that we have the bulletins. So if you need a bulletin, make sure you grab it. And then you'll notice that our very last reading, benediction, is what it's titled. After that, it says silence. At that time, you can depart in silence. There is no official end to this service. It ends with the benediction on Easter morning. So at that time, you can stay seated for as long as you like, or you can get up and leave. Just know that there's no official end. Please join me in worship. It is good to be together, to pray together, to sing together, and to dream together. The story of Jesus' death is difficult to hear. He was, like many people then and now, hurt intentionally by people with power. They wanted to silence him, and for a time they did. You may find you feel pain or sadness or grief remembering. But we call this day good, and we gather here today, not to dwell in this pain, but to dream of something better. And so I pray, come God, be with us in our remembering, stir our imaginations, kindle our compassion, and grant us a deep trust in you. Amen. Our first reading is the poem Still by Jan Richardson. This day, let all stand still, in silence, in sorrow. Sun and moon, be still. Earth, be still. Still the waters, still the wind. Let the ground gape in stunned lamentation. Let it weep as it receives what it thinks it will not give up. Let it groan as it gathers the one who was thought forever stilled. Time, be still. Watch and wait, still. Please join me in a moment of silence.
A reading from John chapter 18, verses 1 through 12. After he said these things, Jesus went out with his disciples and crossed over to the other side of the Kidron Valley. He and his disciples entered a garden there. Judas, his betrayer, also knew the place because Jesus often gathered there with his disciples. Jesus brought a company of soldiers and some guards from the chief priests and Pharisees. They came there carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus knew everything that was to happen to him. So he went out and asked, "Who are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am." Judas, his betrayer, was standing with them. When he asked, "I am," he said, "I am," but shrank back and fell to the ground. He asked them again, "Who are you looking for?" They said, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus answered, "I told you I am. If you are looking for me, then let these people go." This was so that the word he had spoken might be fulfilled. "I didn't lose any one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus told Peter, "Put your sword away. Am I not to drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the guards from the Jewish leaders took Jesus into custody. They bound him. They came there carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. It's hard because it's still happening. It's too real, war and weapons, governments that abuse their power, greed and fear. It's hard because this is still the state of our world. They came there carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. 1942, USA. This is George Todd. The government gathered a database. It was a registry. And then they came down with a curfew. All the Japanese were ordered to be home by 7 p.m. and stay home until 6 a.m. We were imprisoned in our homes at night. And then we discovered our bank accounts had been frozen. We couldn't get access to our life savings. So we were financially straitjacketed. And then the soldiers came for us. They came carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. 1959, Canada. This is Maureen Gloria Johnson talking about how she went to the Lower Post Residential School. I went there with a bus. They'd load us all up on a bus and took us. And I remember my mom had a really hard time letting us kids go. And she had a really hard time. She begged the priest. And the priest said it was law that we had to go. And if we didn't go, then my parents would be in trouble. They came carrying torches and weapons. 1982, Guatemala. This is Patron and Chalk. One day the soldiers came for us, and one of my sons, Avelino, said, "Here come the soldiers. They're going to kill us." I rounded up my children and I told them we had to flee to the mountains. We were running when we heard gunfire, and that's when my husband was killed. They came carrying weapons. 2011, Syria. This is Nada, as recorded by Janine DiGiovanni. While I was lying on the floor, they stood over me, kicking me in the teeth and punching me and using their hands and feet. One man put his military boot in my mouth, and the entire time they were beating me and they kept saying, "You want freedom? Here's your freedom." Every time they said freedom, they kicked. They came. 2014, Palestine. This is Muhammad, aged 8. We were just running and playing, chasing each other around when the soldiers came for us. There's a story in the Old Testament of the Bible. Moses sees a bush burning and hears the voice of God. And Moses asks God, "What is your name?" And God says, "I am." That night in the garden, there was no bush, only a company of soldiers and some guards. And they came there carrying lanterns and torches and weapons. They said, "We're looking for Jesus." You might believe God was nowhere to be found. But then Jesus said, "I am." I don't think they noticed that is the name of God. But we know in Jesus, God comes to us. It means whatever the pain of our world, whatever the burdens we're carrying, whatever the trauma that haunts us, the hate that breaks us, the fear that binds, no matter what we've been through, we may know through Him, God is here. John chapter 18, verses 33 through 36. Pilate went back into the palace. He summoned Jesus and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, Do you say this on your own, or have others spoken to you about me? Pilate responded, I'm not a Jew, am I? Your nation and its chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done? Jesus replied, my kingdom doesn't originate from this world. If it did, my guards would fight so that I wouldn't have been arrested by the Jewish leaders. My kingdom isn't from here.
They all expected him to fight back. That's the way we learned. You defend yourself. You use the power you have to protect and to promote yourself. I instructed my son. This is a father writing on the internet. I instructed my son that if the bullies came after him again, he had 10 seconds to drop the other kid, 10 seconds to do as much damage as possible. Jesus had his seconds and moments, but all he did was say, my kingdom isn't from here. If not here, where? I could dream of another world, of heaven, of an end to all suffering, of walls broken down, of bullies becoming whole, of neighbors becoming visible, of love growing. There's a story told by Avery Dakin Clark about a winter day. He heard this from a person driving on snowy city streets who stopped at a red light behind a van and noticed a man struggling in a wheelchair to get off the curb through the snow. And just then, 2 men jumped out of the van and rushed ahead with shovels and cleared the whole path before the light turned green. She glimpsed it. I really believe that she did. This kingdom that is not from here. The kingdom of let's clear the way for one another. And then there are the ones who forgive, who live with pain and start again, who show compassion even when they're afraid, who caught a glimpse of love and chose to follow it. This kingdom that is not from here. It's not from angry words. It's not from talk of revenge. It's not from trying to get ahead. It's not from winner takes it all. It's not from you have to be ruthless to succeed. It's not from they came there carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. It's not from I came, I saw, I conquered. It's not from we have no king but Caesar. And it's not from history belongs to the victors. The words of Walter Wink, history belongs to the intercessors, those who believe the future into being. The words of Jesus, thy kingdom come. Next, we have a responsive reading from The Wisdom to Survive by Wendell Berry. If we have the wisdom to survive, to stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place, renewing, enriching it. If we will make our season welcome here, asking not too much of earth or of heaven,
then a long time after you're dead, eyes are here.
as houses strongly placed upon the valley sides,
Fields and gardens rich in windows, the river will run clear, as we will never know it.
and over it, birdsong like a canopy.
On the levels of the hills will be green meadows, soft valleys in busy shade.
On the steeps where greed and ignorance cut down the old forest,
An old forest will stand, as the great leaves fall, dripping on its roots.
the veins of forgotten springs will have opened. Families will be singing in the fields.
In their voices, they will hear music within the house ground.
They will take nothing from the ground, they will not return. Whatever the grief at parting, memory native to this valley will spread over it like a grove, and memory will grow into legend, legend into song, song into supper. The abundance of this place, The songs of its people and its birds will be health and wisdom and things on light.
This is no impossible dream. Its hardship is impossibility.
John chapter 19, verses 16b through 18. The soldiers took Jesus prisoner. Carrying his cross by himself, he went out to a place called Skull Place, in the Aramaic Golgotha. That's where they crucified him, and two others with him, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Jesus' mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas and Mary Magdalene, stood near the cross. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to his disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home.
It's not easy to stay. When you walk into that hospital room, you may feel your anxiety rising. As you listen to that hard story, you may want to seek a distraction. When the news is bad, you may not want to hear it. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't face it. You may have felt that. If we stay here, we will be able to love here. If we love here, we will bear witness to hope here. And if we hope here, it might pierce the despair. To watch, to listen, to stay. Is there any other way to love? This is Lucy Calanthe in the book When Breath Becomes Air, writing about the night her husband Paul was admitted to the hospital for the last time. When we re-entered the emergency room, Paul, on a gurney this time, turned toward me and whispered, "This might be how it ends. I'm here with you," I said. Please pray with me. Oh Christ, for people in hospital rooms, for refugee camps, for border crossings, for city streets, for the people who choose violence, and for the people who are afraid, for all of us, we pray. For our own grief, for the pain we carry, for the pain you carry. Help us bear witness, help us remain, help us bear love, your love, in this troubled world.
John chapter 19, verses 28 through 30. After this, knowing that everything was already completed in order to fulfill the scripture, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was nearby. So the soldiers soaked a sponge in it, placed it on a hyssop branch, and held it up to his lips. When he had received the sour wine, Jesus said, "It is completed." Bowing his head, he gave up his life. Prayer for Overcoming Indifference by Kayam Stern. For the sin of silence, for the sin of indifference, for the secret complicity of the neutral, for the closing of borders, for the washing of hands, for the crime of indifference, for the sin of silence, for the closing of borders, for all that was done and for all that was not done. Let there be no forgetfulness before the throne of glory. Let there be remembrance within the human heart, and let there at least be forgiveness when your children, O God, are free and at peace.
I need to tell of my people in their grief by Wendell Berry. I need to tell about my people in their grief. I don't think grief is something they get over or get away from. In a little community like this, it is around us, and it's in us all the time, and we know it. We know that every night, war or no war, there are people lying awake grieving. And every morning, there are people waking up to absences that will never be filled. But we shut our mouths and go ahead. How we are is fine. The thing you have most dreaded has happened at last. The worst thing you might have experienced has happened, and you didn't expect it. Even so, how are you? Fine. And yet the comfort somehow gets passed around in a few words that are never forgotten. A note in the mail, a touch, a pat, a hug, a kind of waiting with, a kind of standing by, to the end. Once in a while, we hear it sung out in a hymn, when every throat seems suddenly widened with love and a common longing. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore.